Round 2 of the Sinquefield Cup saw Fabiano Caruana continue his fabulous run with a victory over Maxime Vachier-Lagrave that included some fantastic home preparation. He's now on a perfect 2-0 score. Meanwhile, Levan Aronian recovered from a rough opening against Veselin Topalov to gain a full point. And world champion Magnus Carlsen has a fantastic record against Hikaru Nakamura. But on the other hand, he was black in today's game. Carlsen surprised Nakamura in the opening, and it ended in a perpetual check. It's still early in the tournament, but Italian-American Fabiano Caruana impresses with his perfect 2-0 score. He's become the man to catch, and Magnus Carlsen plays him today. It all starts right now.
Hello and welcome to another exciting day of the Sinquefield Cup. We are coming at you live from the chess capital of America. It is another gorgeous day here in the Central West End at the Chess Club of St. Louis. But I know you guys are ready to get this action started, so let's head down to the studio with Jen, Yasser, and Maurice.
And here we are at round 3 of the Sinquefield Cup in St. Louis, the strongest tournament in chess history. We are getting started. The players are arriving for the round 3 games. You see visitors coming in to the capital of chess in America for an exciting weekend of chess. It's going to be packed this weekend. We encourage you guys to come out if you have a chance.
Absolutely. There's great stuff going on here in St. Louis.
That's right. I'm Jennifer Shahade, and I'm here with Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, and we are going to be giving you the lowdown as every day. Round 3, if for round 2 is any indication, we've got our work cut out for us.
Without question. I'm still recovering from round 2. I was studying the games, and I still can't make heads or tails out of the game between Caruana and MVL. Today, we got some great matchups.
Yeah, let's take a look at the standings first. So Fabiano Caruana, the man to catch on a perfect 2-0 score. 1 point for each ice bucket, if you will. Levan Aronian, 1.5 after winning his first game in the tournament yesterday against Topalov. Nakamura and Carlsen both with 1 point each. MVL with half a point. And Veselin Topalov, 0 points. Today's pairings, we've got very key matchup between world champion Magnus Carlsen and tournament leader Fabiano Caruana. We also got Topalov versus Nakamura. That game will be exciting. And finally, MVL versus Aronian. Now, what do you bet on, Maurice? What is going to be our big game of the day?
Well, once upon a time, Magnus Carlsen could bet that he was the youngest player in the competition, the upstart trying to prove to the older rivals that he belongs. Well, he's now the veteran, and he's being chased by the younger by 1.5 years, Fabiano Caruana, who has been proving himself, has broken into the 2800 club, is now second in the world, and is standing at 2 points in this competition. Their head-to-head matchups have been interesting. No doubt these two players know each other well. Carlsen has the edge, of course, at 5-3, but that may not last for long the way Caruana is playing. This should be an exciting matchup today here at the Sinquefield Cup. What a round. Back to you guys.
Yeah, I'm going to be really excited to see how that game starts. You know, of course, in Carlsen's last encounter with Caruana, he won on the black side as a Scandinavian. So. Right. Now he also gets the white pieces for the first time in the tournament.
Absolutely. And although we're going to overuse the word critical, in many ways, this round 3, is a critical round. First of all, Magnus needs a victory to get himself to become the leader. Fabiano has an opportunity to run away with the tournament with a victory. And furthermore, Veselin Topalov, having lost his first 2 games, he's got a bullseye on his back, and Hikaru Nakamura knows that, and when there's blood in the water, the Sharks are going to attack. So I see very important games of those 2 players as well. If Topalov, on the other hand, were to win the game, he would suddenly be at 1 point, tied with Nakamura, and Hikaru would be feeling that his tournament has been ruined by losing to the tail ender. So vital matchups even early as round 3 for the Sinquefield Cup.
That's right, and we're going to have some interesting openings as well, I think, in this round. What do you think Veselin Topalov is going to play against Nakamura? I noticed that Nakamura actually played a French recently in the Olympiad against Peter Lecco.
Yeah.
And part of me is thinking maybe this game won't be a French.
Yeah, wow. I would see Topalov not necessarily for choice in terms of playing e4, but let's suggest he does play e4. I see Hikaru saying, okay, since you've lost your first 2 games, I'm going to play the Najdorf.
The Sicilian,
Yeah, the Sicilian Najdorf, and really try to make us as complex a game as possible and hope that the miscalculations that are afflicting Topalov continue.
And pleasing the commentators, no doubt.
No doubt.
We love to see Najdorf.
Wide open game with all kinds of tactics. That's the best.
And Topalov will probably be pretty happy too because he's an expert in these Sicilians and he has a lot of fun in those games.
Expert, yes, and quite the black player too. I mean, he enjoys playing the Sicilians. In any case, wide open c4, e4, d4 for Topalov. Hard to guess all of these players. Now, in the game between Max and Levon, that game too, Levon won, hoping that he could keep up his success. And MVL, we need him. Well, he's come to this tournament extremely well prepared. And it seems more so with the white pieces than with the black pieces.
All right, so today, what do you think we're going to see in that game then? Do you think we see Berlin?
I think we might see some, no, Berlin, no. I kind of thinking we might see some very, very sharp semi-Slav. I'm not saying the Botvinnik triangle, but Botvinnik pawn sacrifice, pardon me, but I would lean towards a d4. But again, it's very hard to guess.
Well, even Topalov, we don't know whether he'll play e4 or d4, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Right? So we predicted him to play e4 in round 1, and we were wrong about that.
Right.
So anything could happen there. And then Carlsen Caruana, of course, we'll be intrigued to see how that opening shapes up as well. These guys play a lot of fighting chess, so many decisive games.
Absolutely. Well, in that match of the heavyweights between number 1 and number 2, what Maurice was mentioning is that they've played 14 games and have had 8 decisive results. Normally speaking, when 2 top grandmasters get together, the likely result is supposed to be a draw. Well, 8 decisive games out of 14, it's clear that these 2 players like to go toe-to-toe.
That's right. And I think that shows a little bit about the changing direction of chess, right? I mean, lots of initiatives in recent years, anti-draw initiatives, have really kind of sunk in, so that's really just part of the great players' fibers to fight and fight and fight.
Absolutely, and this new generation of players is basically making my generation of players a little bit embarrassed by the fighting spirit that we see at the very highest levels.
It's fantastic, indeed. And, you know, it interested me yesterday that Magnus Carlsen, he is not the type to dish out compliments if he doesn't believe them. He's more likely to make a sarcastic joke if he doesn't feel like making a compliment, right?
Okay.
And then you can figure it out yourself whether it's real or not, right?
Right.
Whereas yesterday, glowing words to say about Caruana, said, "This is my World Championship challenger."
Yeah, he was very clear about it, and the ratings, by the way, Maurice and I were discussing that in the last few months. The gap between number 1 and number 2 has actually closed by 20 rating points, and it's a very lucky thing. And for Magnus that he won in Tromsø, otherwise the gap might be just closed by 30 rating points.
Now, if you are wondering who Nakamura is, you can tell from the webcam shot because he's wearing a shirt that says Nakamura.
Very helpful, no? It looks like
Indeed.
he's got a lot of sponsor logos, although maybe just the shirt.
Red Bull, he's got a Red Bull, yeah, and he's drinking Red Bull again. Recently signed a sponsorship, and of course he's also sponsored by the St. Louis Chess Club and
Certainly.
resides here.
Absolutely, certainly.
Very exciting. These guys are going to get underway in any minute, and I just can't wait to see the openings. If you guys want to chime in, especially at the beginning of the games, hashtag SyncUp.
Twitter.
And we will try to, point out your comments and questions. Like in the past, we've gotten comments by so many grandmasters and top players, so it's always great to have your say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, tell us what you think. Hashtag SyncCup. And here we go. Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana.
Waiting for the opening.
So what's your bet here? E4, D4?
E4. I see Magnus, world champion Magnus, playing one E4 in this matchup. Remember in round 1 that Levon Aronian was white in a Slav defense against Nakamura. That's a variation that Topolov's a real expert in. So I might guess that Topolov's going to go for D4, lean towards D4 and try to get the Slav defense positions that he knows so well.
Interesting. And when Magnus, if Magnus plays E4, do you think he's going to play Aurelio Lopez?
Yes, I think he would defend with a classical king pawn defense. Hard to say exactly where he might go. He likes to play Caruana, that is, the white side of the Berlin.
Well, and he won a game against Magnus, actually, on the white side of the Berlin.
Precisely so. So I don't think it would actually be a Berlin. Something a little bit more like a Breyer, and there we have the handshakes and the clocks have started, and right away I do believe we have seen E4 by Magnus. Just waiting for my board to confirm that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
We see this webcam shot. It does look like a double king pawn indeed. Knight F3, and there is a small chance maybe. Oh wait, is that a bishop C4? I think that's a bishop C4.
No, those are the two queens behind the clock at the moment. So I believe Knight F3 is the last move.
Is the best move.
The last move.
Okay.
Last move. I apologize.
Also probably the best move, right?
Maybe.
After 2. Nope, I was right. Yes,
E4?
It was bishop C4. E4, E5, bishop C4 was played.
Okay,
So not the best move, just kidding.
Just the last move. Okay, it's the bishop's opening. Not even Knight F3.
No, it can transpose into lines with Knight F3, of course.
Of course.
But bishop C4, definitely not Aurelio Lopez.
Exactly.
And adroitly avoiding the preparation from Magnus last round, right? Don't play G6 now.
Knight F3 with the attack against the pawn has been played so routinely. This move, bishop C4, is kind of faded out of play at the top.
Yes, knights before bishops, right?
Knights
That's what we
before
tell
bishops.
Our students starting out in the game, that you move your knight out before your bishop because you're not sure whether you want to put it on C4 or B5. It might change depending on what your opponent plays.
Well, there we go. Well, obviously the bishop C4 setting up for early attacks against the pawn on
So
F7.
Carlsen making an error in the second move.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, tell him you're available for lessons. I mean, when you're not coaching Rex, you'll take on the world champion.
You also said 2 Knight F3 was the best move.
I will stand by that. But okay, mixing it up early. Let's take a.
It's very important because getting that psychological edge. We've seen that a lot in this tournament. I mean, remember MVL playing the Scotch against Magnus and almost befuddling him.
Right.
Magnus had to work very hard and use a lot of his time in order to find the correct defense.
Exactly.
And then, of course, Fabiano Caruana, crystal clear example of beautiful home cooking that led to a victory yesterday.
Yeah, and like I was saying when we started the show, yesterday I was really looking deeply into that game of round 2, and I still can't make heads or tails of it. I don't know what's going on.
Great and interesting game, and we do have a couple more moves here, Knight F6, D3, and now I do think this increases the chance that it's going to transpose to something on the tamer side. It depends whether white plays F4 or ends up just putting his knight on F3. Maurice, what do you think?
Well, clearly, Caruana has been showing fantastic preparation throughout this tournament. That has been his forte. Nakamura, when he was asked about Caruana's play, he mentioned that as the primary reason why he was at 2-0, showing just simply fantastic preparation. His players have fallen into what he has gotten home brew, if you will. Well, we also know that Magnus Carlsen is not a player who loves theory, who loves to go into main lines and dig deep for novelties. He will play anything. He'll put any piece down on the board. You see him play sometimes even random moves that you look and say, what's the point of that? And his whole reason was to duck the preparation of players, and that is because he knows when the game starts to heat up, he can take you long and deep into some end games where his incredible skill will win out. And that's what he plays for. So don't be surprised if you see a very slow developing game from this one with Magnus looking to win. Remember, their average wins between these two players, 55 moves. So we'll be here a while as Magnus seeks to put that boa constrictor on his opponent. Guys?
That's right, Maurice. In fact, Magnus said yesterday that when he played this G6 move against Nakamura, it was precisely because he didn't want to just go in for those mainline Berlins, which certainly Nakamura would have thought was a likely possibility.
Right, right. Well, in what the situation that Caruana is facing right now is he can go into a very, very forcing sequence of moves that basically starts with c7, c6, knight f3, d5, bishop b3, where it's black establishing the classical pawn center early, and it's black trying to seize the initiative. The reason that
and
white...
if captured bishop b5 check, that's a line as well, right?
Normally they don't let trade the pawn on e4 for the pawn on c6.
Because you just have bishop d7, okay, right?
Yeah. So black in this situation, so pardon me, white in this situation, this is justified tactically because white is putting very big pressure against the f7 pawn. So it's not, black does not capture the pawn on e4, rather he plays bishop d6. And again, this is a very forcing and sharp line of play that Fabiano could be considering.
Well, that's the thing, though. It gives black that extra option, and if black doesn't want to take that option, he can play more normal move.
Bishop c5 and play for a quiet position, the Italian game.
Okay, unless white wants to mix it up and try to get f4 in before knight f3. Otherwise, it will transpose into an Italian game.
Right. This option really is frowned upon, especially now that the bishop is on the c5 g1 diagonal. White's king can get into trouble after, for example, a sequence of moves that goes like this: takes, takes. And if you take, look at white's king. May not be the most comfortable king in the world. After castles, rook e8 check, bishop g4, and knight takes d5. Allows black to seize the initiative early, and that's not what Magnus would like.
And
so
indeed
f4 is too ambitious.
Indeed, we got actually a knight. We got this the variation you were referring to, c6, followed by knight f3, d5, and bishop b3.
Right.
So just to point out, after knight f3, d5, taking on d5.
Oh yes, take on d5.
And now after bishop b5 check, it looks like you can just play, well, a number of things, but bishop d7. And now we don't have time to take on e5. And after bishop takes d7, knight takes d7.
And black nicely protects the pawn on d5 and is a happy camper. Here black is probably more than equalized.
That's right, because we just got the center.
And we've lost time with our bishop. We've moved it once, twice, thrice, and simply traded it. So that's why the main move is to play this bishop b3. And now
Fabiano has replied with a check, bishop b4 check.
At what moment?
After bishop b3.
Oh, this has already been played. And now, instead of capturing, which is not good, he's played bishop b4 check. That's a surprising check. The idea is to encourage c2, c3, and rob white of the possibility of knight c3. So let's just say that, for example, after the normal continuation, bishop d6, in many variations, white plays the move knight c3, putting pressure against the pawn on d5. So here what we see is this move bishop b4 check by Fabiano, and after the move c3, then his intention is to drop back and therefore deny white the opportunity of developing his knight to its most natural square, knight to c3, which would put pressure against the pawn on d5. An interesting little subtlety there by Fabiano early. Shall we go around the horn?
Look at that little kid writing down all the moves. He doesn't know. He knows that they're on DGT, but why not just write it down, just in case? Practice your chess notation.
Not only that, but then you can get the players to sign your score sheet of their game. Shall we just take a look at the Topalov-Nakamura game? Because I think that, too, is going to be a very sharp
So we did see E4 from Veselin.
Right.
And it looks like we got some kind of anti-marshal on tap.
Exactly. So a Ruy Lopez, no Berlin, and bishop c5. So this has become a very topical opening variation. And Nakamura has played it quite a number of times and done fairly well with the black pieces.
And not an anti-marshal, in fact, more just a Ruy Lopez with the slightly unusual early bishop c5, rather than the old main line where you would stick the bishop on e7 instead.
Right. So Hikaru's going for a much more active bishop. Now the line that I know goes castles, d4, bishop drops back to b6, and there's a long variation where black sacrifices this pawn on b5. But again, this is a very sharp line that Hikaru's played very well.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision to kind of put your bishop on that side of the board because, of course, it's more active, but white gets a little bit of time hitting it with d4. And then furthermore, if white ever gets some initiative on the king side, that bishop is no longer guarding the dark squares.
Exactly. So I just point out a tactic that I fell for when I was coming up the ranks. I thought to myself, oh, isn't this sweet? I'm just going to grab this pawn on e4. I was such a happy guy.
Bishop d5 is not too thematic. That's the problem when there's a winning move that is never normally played. Right.
That was like the cold shower move. Boy, that just woke me up. It's like, oh, I hate that. And with this move, bishop b5, attacking two knights at the same time, I was forced to give up a knight for two pawns, and it was insufficient, and I lost with black. So that was a good lesson learned. I never fell for that cheapo again. And how about Levon and Max? What is going on in their game?
That game. What was that? Another? No, we didn't predict one move correctly. I think we got a d4 opening, starting with knight f3 though.
Right. So opening move, knight f3, d5, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, d4, c6. Now, I'm wondering about that move because it doesn't seem like that's a required move, so to speak. C7, c6 is the type of move you usually play after you've castled and played knight f6. So there's this very specific reason why Levon played it. I think it must be related to the idea that after c4 takes, black has opportunities of trying to keep his extra pawn with b7, b5. Let's see what actually happened. Castles, knight f6 now. And so again, the only way to really attack in the center is either with the move e2, e4, which is going to be very hard to accomplish, or the more direct c4. So let's just take a quick look at what would happen if black tries to maintain the pawn on c4 for a quick second. Something like this.
And so now I'm hitting the c6 pawn, so...
Yeah, the immediate b5, as you just point out, there's either knight takes c6 or even possibly knight takes b5, which would ruin black's whole strategy in that case. So probably he could play bishop to d5, seeking to trade the light square bishops on g2 and neutralize white's advantage perhaps in this fashion.
Right, okay. And then we would have to decide whether or not to try to just grab that pawn or play f3.
Yes, exactly. So bishop d5, f3. Now we can go for this b5 move, and we're going to get a very topsy-turvy game going on in this case because black has snapped a pawn off the board, but maybe he's facing some severe attack over here on the king side based on f4, f5.
Or white could just play the tame captures on c4 and a bunch of pieces will be traded, and it will be very uncharacteristic of other Sinquefield Cup games.
Yeah, true that. So let's just see what Magnus has done. And Magnus did play, he fell for it, so to speak. He played the move c2, c3, which is a very natural move. After all, not only are you blocking a check, but you're picking picking up a tempo against the dark squared bishop with
And
this
that's
move.
why you rarely see this move in e4, e5 openings, right?
Yeah,
The
because-
c3 is usually helpful.
Precisely. It's a move that you as white are usually trying to get in, so when your opponent encourages the move, it does make a strange impression. Magnus followed c3 up with the move bishop g5.
But it has been played by many strong grandmasters, including Geary, who actually was the one to challenge Fabiano Caruana to the Ice Bucket Challenge.
Yeah, and,
So,
and I
Dutch
think
grandmaster.
right. I think Fabiano is very happy for the challenge because it really seems to have invigorated him, hasn't it? Bishop g5.
Invigorated, Woke him up, cold shower, right?
Cold shower. Bishop g5. As we see, the knight on f6 protects the pawn on d5. So
And here's the vitals on Fabiano Caruana, 2801 rating coming into this tournament and up to 2808.
fantastic, just simply fantastic. Born in America, American-Italian, Fabiano feels right at home here in St. Louis. He's played a great event so far. So at the moment,
He pointed out yesterday in his post-game interview that he also started 2-0 in Norway.
Yes.
And ended up, I don't know if collapse is the right word, but
he faded. He ran out of gas at the
he
end.
lost a couple games and just ended with an even score, I
Right.
believe. So that was a painful memory. So trying not to get too excited about being 2-0.
Yeah.
And Magnus pointed out that tournament as well, too.
Exactly. Well, that was a key event in the young career of Fabiano. You go out to a massive plus score, let's say, early, and you're feeling really, really good, and your confidence gets shaken when you can't hold the lead.
And it's similar, for more symmetry, he played Magnus Carlsen in the third round in that tournament as well, although
Yes.
it was a draw.
Yes, the same as here. Interesting, isn't it? Bishop g5 by Fabiano, now by Magnus. Now, what Magnus's intention, clear intention, is that by pinning this knight on f6 to the queen on d8, he wants to capture this pawn on d5. And now Fabiano has a decision to make. If he trades on e4, releasing the tension, the resulting position, while it's very symmetrical, is actually favorable for white. If you compare, for example, the role of these two bishops, the bishop on d6 versus the bishop on b3, bishop on b3 is more active, the bishop on d6 is playing a defensive role. Also, from white's point of view, he may very shortly play the move knight d2 and knight c4, picking up a tempo against the bishop on d6. So from black's point of view, that trade is something that he would prefer not to engage in, and maybe he should play the move bishop e6, maintaining his central pawns. Then if we just continue the line for a little bit, knight d2, castles, we get a situation where black has occupied the center, but he may have trouble maintaining these two pawns in the middle of the board because white has this nice little break d3, d4 himself when white enjoys an advantage in development if the position were to explode open.
Now we've got some tweets coming in at our hashtag SyncUp, and we've got a nice comment on the Nakamura the Nakamura Topalov battle, and Lawrence Trent, international master, who also does a lot of commentary.
Indeed,
in fact,
excellent.
he's going to be commenting on the Millionaire Chess Tournament with Grandmaster
wonderful.
Maurice Ashley, I believe. And he pointed out a game from the Olympiad, one of the bright spots in Nakamura's tournament there. Wasn't thrilled with his result, especially losing in the last round, but he did win this nice game against Rustam Kazimjanov.
Right.
And that was in this line. He was actually playing white then, though. Same
that is
line with a bishop c5 or a Lopez.
Right. So colors reversed. Hikaru showed how to win it with white, and he's now playing it today with black. So the current
Well, you see a lot of that in this tournament, right? Like people playing openings that they enjoy for both colors, right?
Yes.
Because the understanding is, of course, deeper if you play it for the opposite side as well.
Exactly. And you're playing a position that you've obviously analyzed to a great length. So Hikaru feels that he understands the position so well enough that he can play it for both sides.
So keep those comments coming to our hashtag SyncUp. We are going to take a quick break and be back for more on the start of the exciting action, day 3 of the SyncUp.
My name is Fabiano Caruana, and you are watching the Sinquefield Cup live in St. Louis.
Welcome to the world of the surreal. You take the blue pawn and return to the comfortable world of chess tournaments as you know them. You take the red pawn and I'll show you a chess event beyond your wildest imagination.
I'm Hikaru Nakamura. You're watching the Sinquefield Cup live in St. Louis.
Hey, and welcome back. So, what do you think today, based on the early part of the game? What do you think is going to be our most thrilling game today?
Well, I'm actually still going with the two games that we highlighted at the very start, calling them key or critical matchups. I think the Magnus versus Magnus Fabiano game is still going to keep us riveted for the whole of the round. And the Topalov-Nakamura game is still a heavy theoretical dispute, and we'll see which player comes best prepared with a novelty for that game. Veselin pausing either to recollect his preparation or just trying to find a new idea, inspiration at the chessboard itself. I noticed in the game between Max and Levon, Maxime played knight bt2 as a prelude to playing c4, and then we saw the move bishop e6 by Levon Aronian, essentially encouraging white, if he were to trade on c4, then we're going to get a very static game where we have literally a symmetrical type of position. After knight e5, I really don't see white as gaining anything out of this particular line of play. Rather, I see white as playing the move b2, b3, which is a bit double-edged, because keep in mind, this bishop on g7 is waiting on that long diagonal, kind of an ambush. I know you love playing the Grunfeld defenses, black.
And dragon.
Yeah, and dragon.
Anything that gets that bishop over there in g7.
Exactly. Protecting your king and doing double duty, so to
Bishop
speak.
takes a1 at some point.
Right. So it may encourage Levon to lash out with a sharp move like c6, c5, which is rather standard, again, when black is fianchettoed and staring down this long diagonal. So besides b2, b3 and captures on d5, not too much else in it for white. Queen b3 usually just gets matched by queen b6. And again, a rather static game from this opening, I see. Let's go back to the world champion. We did, when we left it, bishop g5 was the previous move. And I must say, I always liked it whenever my opponents pin my pin my knight to my queen, as we see with the bishop on g5, pinning the knight on f6 to the queen. I always liked getting in this little tickle, whether it be a7, a6, or h7, h6. Magnus backed off with his bishop. He played bishop h4. Just a quick note that the move g5 is kind of a strategic suicide, advancing on the wing too early.
Well, yeah, we saw g4 in previous battles in this tournament, but they had a lot more pluses. The problem here is you can't really see the positive of this move, right?
Well,
it doesn't, like even in Topalov's game against Fabiano, right?
Mm-hmm.
G4 was securing the f5 square, stopping f5, so it had a lot of logic to it. Whereas
Right.
here it's just all bad news.
Well, except for the
Except for
very
winning a pawn,
the very
but-
specific idea of winning a pawn, but there's
But
no
you
win of a
can win it,
pawn.
yeah.
I grab it right back with bishop takes e5 and all.
And then f7 is going to be hanging after, well,
Right.
yeah, after bishop takes and queen d8, knight takes c5, you're going to be hitting f7 multiple times.
Oh,
so.
that would be that would be dreadful. That would
Yeah.
be dreadful. And
And we've got Maurice Ashley with some thoughts on this game as well.
Yes, Jen, it's not every day you see the bishops opening at the grandmaster level, so I decided to go into the database to search to see what games have been played, and I was not able to find any recent games, and in this line, actually, no games with grandmasters playing. But something really telling came out of the data. Out of the 7 wins that happened in this exact position, Black won 5 of those. So interesting that Magnus has chosen to go into this particular line. Clearly, Caruana has prepared this variation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have played bishop to b4 check, that provocative move. And the data seems to indicate that Black is completely fine. Of course, White has never been Magnus Carlsen in any of those games. So we'll see what is going to happen next from the mind of the young champion. Back to you guys.
That's a remarkable statistic. I would have never guessed that Black was doing so well from this rather tame position. In fact, I actually have a preference for White's position, and we do see this move Queen e7, by the way, from Fabiano, getting his queen off the d file and making added protection to the pawn on e5. It's conceivable, it's going to take a long time, but it's conceivable he may be thinking about knight d7 to f8 to g6, a long maneuver.
Kind of reminiscent of Roy Lopez maneuvers, right?
Exactly, exactly. So I'm expecting that Magnus will play the very natural looking knight on b1 to d2. Now, keep in mind that when Black put his queen on the e7 square, in a very funny way, he's actually kind of throwing down a little bit of a flag and saying to White, White starts thinking, boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could put a knight on the f5 square attacking Black's queen? So we could see Magnus trying such an approach where one day he brings this knight back to e3 and
right,
plays
similar
for
to
a
your
knight
suggestion
f5.
for Fabiano, right? Except the pawn on h6 makes the knight f5 square even juicier.
Exactly, because then it's harder to boot it away with the move g7, g6.
Luckily, that bishop on c8 it does some job of controlling the square.
And let's see it from Black's point of view. From Black's point of view, when Black plays the move knight b8 to d7, he would like to bring his knight on c5 because he's got a natural target in this bishop on b3 and trying to chase that bishop off an active, effective diagonal. So still, while I do prefer White's position, at the moment I think Fabiano can be pleased with the outcome of this opening. And the key game, from Fabiano's point of view, it would be just wonderful for him to make a comfortable draw with the black pieces.
That's right, and he doesn't seem too frazzled by this either. Of course, he couldn't have expected it, but he seems to be playing pretty confidently despite that.
And he has played the move knight b8, d7, by the way. And let me just go to, once more to the game. I'm keeping a careful...
I mean, just to review the times, I mean, he's only used a few more minutes than Magnus, and of course, considering the fact that there's no way he could have predicted this opening, that's saying something.
Yeah, it's a positive, without question. And again, when you're black against the world champion, one of the things that you really want to achieve, and especially so for Fabiano, is a stable position. And in a way, the position's rather symmetrical and therefore is rather stable. So I think Fabiano is pleased, even though he was surprised by Magnus's choice.
And we've got Grandmaster Ben Feingold.
Wonderful.
He's doing some live commentary over at Leicester Sports Bar.
Yes.
The best sports bar to watch chess in America. So come on down, and right now he's with Grandmaster Maurice Ashley.
He gets the cushy job, Jen, with all the chicken wings and food over there. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks, Maurice. Thanks for having me.
Well, what do you think about today's round? First of all, let's start with the key matchup between number 1 and 2 in the live ratings in the world, Carlsen and Caruana.
Yeah, actually, I've done a lot of commentary here at the Chess Club, and we always say when the game starts out with fireworks, sometimes it fizzles to like a perpetual check. And when the games start out like they're starting today, fireworks happen later. So right now, I think all 3 games are sort of stayed, but I think between moves 20 and 30, we're going to see fireworks. And again, Carlsen tried to get Fabiano of his preparation, but it didn't seem to work out very well. I think Fabiano equalized pretty easily.
It's amazing, this kid, Fabiano Caruana is playing so confidently, and even in lines you think, no way he's well prepared here, he's showing that his range is tremendous.
You know, when I walked over here from Lester's, I passed his second, and he seemed very happy, talking, smiling with everyone. So I guess he's pretty calm about this position.
Clearly. Well, let's get to another game that does seem like it could get very interesting. The game between Topalov and Nakamura. Already an Archangel variation of the Ruy Lopez with lots of action going on. Nakamura has been on both sides of this position before. Right. He seems to play well.
And this can be a very interesting line because potentially black can sacrifice a pawn and get sort of a kingside attack in like the main lines where white's playing knight a3 and taking on b5. And it seemed like Veselin wasn't as well prepared as I thought he would be. He thought a while and played sort of a solid h3 instead of a more main line, and he's been taking more time, and he's just trying to get some position where, you know, Hikaru didn't prepare a lot and play some aggressive line. I think Veselin's not very confident right now about his tactical calculation ability just this event, and he's trying to keep the game more calm and maybe hope that Hikaru falls on his sword thinking like, okay, I have to win this game, I'm playing Topalov and I haven't won yet. And maybe he's trying to be a little more calm today. It seems like all the players are being a little more calm, but if you're going to have white in this kind of position and you're not going to try to get an advantage, I think that's the players of black are going to be pretty happy today.
I would think so. What about this next game? This really has started out very slowly. The game between Maxim Vasilograf, who lost yesterday, and Aronian, who surged with a win.
You know, we didn't know this with Bishop e6, and we looked in our database and noticed that a fellow Armenian who also lives in Germany, Melkumian, has played Bishop e6. So it seems like this is an Armenian move, not a very common move. And well, Vasilograf didn't seem too surprised. He's just playing very solid today. I think some of the players are a little scared today because of what happened yesterday. There was a lot of decisive results. And I think Magnus might be just a little afraid of Fabiano today, not wanting to go into somebody who's just on fire and just keep the game in calm waters. So right now we see 3 calm positions, but I'm expecting as the games go on, we're going to see fireworks.
So you're betting that the first 2 rounds, which were just surreal in their excitement, has affected the players, and maybe day 3 might be something of a rest or a cagey day?
A little bit, but you know, again, I would actually be very surprised if all the games end in draws. I think this is the calm before the storm, and they're just making sure, based on the first 2 rounds, we saw great preparation by MVL, by Fabiano, by Magnus, so they're making sure nobody's going to beat them in the opening, and they're going to start playing in the middle game.
Well, thanks so much for your insights. Grandmaster Ben Feingold, head on back over to Lester's and bring us some chicken wings. Back to you guys, Jen and Yas.
Sure.
That's right. Perfect things for commentators to wear, right? So we can get all over our jackets.
Yeah.
Buffalo sauce.
There we go.
But thanks to Grandmaster Ben Feingold, we also have a pair of commentators at the World Chess Hall of Fame.
Ian Rogers
We've got,
and
yes.
Alejandro.
Actually, Varuja Jacobian.
Oh,
Alejandro's over at Lester's.
Pardon me.
And here's a shot of Lester's, actually. And there is food, but the spectators themselves seem to be more focused on the chess and the bulletin. So there's actually a bulletin produced every night in which you can see some grandmaster analysis of the games if you're haven't had enough of our analysis.
Right, and the puzzle on the daily bulletin puzzle as well. Going back to the game of Magnus, by the way, I'm intrigued by this move, Bishop g3 by Magnus. It seemed to me that Magnus was pleased by having pinned this knight to the knight on f6, and yet he voluntarily released the pin against the knight in order to put pressure against the pawn on e5. And I'm thinking also that by vacating the h4 square, he's making the maneuver knight h4 to f5 a possibility. But moving that bishop once, twice, thrice, I'm not so sure if that was the right approach, but an intriguing move for sure.
Well, also, as you pointed out earlier, that knight on d7 can move to f8, so that when knight f5 comes, bishop takes f5 is possible.
Yes.
So of course, if the knight can really land on f5, that would be pretty devastating. But we can do knight c5, we can do knight f8, knight e6. Right. We've got some different possibilities to make sure that we shore up that square. Now, in order to really get that square, you need to stick 2 knights, right?
Yeah, knight on e3, knight on f5, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to get knight c4, knight e3, and knight h4, but of course that's very slow.
I might just point out one little trappy move, a trap. After the very nice, very looking move castles, there is a little bit of a trick here. Knight h4, as we've been mentioning, the knight coming to f5. That's a rather attractive square to fork queen and bishop. And in case of knight c5, as you mentioned, just to be able to keep the f5 square protected. Well, here's the stunner.
Right.
If you hadn't noticed it a moment ago, you'll certainly notice it now. The pawn on f7 is pinned. The knight jumps to g6 with a fork of queen and rook. White would win the exchange and
So for those of
be
you watching at
materially
home, the
better.
lesson here is castling is always really bad.
No, that's not
Don't
the lesson.
castle.
Always castle. Don't listen to Jen. I mean, she's
This is the-
ruining Rex's game
This
as
is
we
the
speak.
exception to the rule, as we say, right?
Right.
Of course, there are tactical exceptions. Usually, almost all the time, we win a castle.
Well,
but
let's just say
here,
the timing of castling you have to be careful about. The timing of castling.
well, yeah, but this one's a little tricky though because knight h4. It's not a one mover. It's like knight h4 is a strategic move, and then you need to cover f5.
Right.
So instead, what do you suggest here? Knight f8 or knight c5 immediately?
Well, a funny move because White has spent so much time moving his bishop around. I'm actually thinking that a funny and a quiet move is the voluntary retreat bishop d6, c7. So the first idea is you're just getting out of this potential attack with knight c4, and you're leaving the pawn on e4 hanging. Black is actually waiting for white to castle. So for example, after castles. Now, after, for example, a move like knight h4, obviously not the only move with that same threat that we mentioned before, the move knight f5 isn't quite so devastating. For example, rook e8, getting away from the threat of knight g6, and in case of knight f5, now you're not attacking the bishop, the queen can go back, and you've got these ideas of knight c5 and bishop f5. So
True, but I could play something. I could try to play like a prophylactic move here, maybe
in
queen
this
f.
specific position, like
Well, maybe I could play
Like-
queen f3.
Okay,
So that
queen
now,
f3.
if you play knight c5, I have time to play knight takes h6.
check, right? And then after takes, you're a very happy camper. You
Yeah, it's
run a pawn.
A little
and,
cheapo. Hey, you cheapoed me
Yeah,
earlier. I think the
absolutely.
lesson here is there's more cheapos in this position for white than for black.
Yes,
Right?
but okay.
And we've got actually something from this game as well, I believe, from Grandmaster Maurice Ashley. Oh wait, maybe a different game. What? Some interesting game.
Right.
Well, just a quick note. It looks as though it is Magnus who has made the first new move. Bishop to g3 was not in the database before. Castles was, queen e2 was, but his bishop g3, as you pointed out, yeah, is a strange move to your eyes. Well, strange to everybody else who has seen this position before. Bishop to g3, the novelty. Caruana has responded with bishop c7, as you mentioned, so we'll see where this game goes, but now we know that it is now in new channels. Guys?
All right, so a fun strategic / tactical battle here. There's going to be a few little tactics on tap, and it'll be fun to see how these guys maneuver their knights. We're going to take a quick break and be back for more from the third round of the Sinquefield Cup.
I'm Levon Aronian. You're watching the Sinquefield Cup live here in St. Louis.
Wow, what a marvelous clip there. How many super grandmasters or chess personalities and GMs did you see in that? I saw women's world champion Alexandra Kostanjuk, former world champion.
Right.
I saw a lot of Hikaru, of course.
I saw you playing Blitz,
That's
Jen,
right.
in there.
I was playing hula chess against Ruslan Goletiani as well.
Who won?
In hula chess?
Yeah. You've got to keep the hula going while you...
Right, exactly. I mean...
You can't make a move when your hula has fallen, can you?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where the idea is that hula hooping and dancing and music, things like that, are not as hyper competitive. So you're combining a zero-sum game with an activity that's not a zero-sum game. But because you're a chess player, you immediately think win and loss.
Right, for sure. And in hula chess, both are winners, you mean?
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Exactly, because you're burning calories, you're using your brain. The competitive mind and the artistic mind, you know, merging, and that's what the Hall of Fame is kind of about as well.
Yeah.
Getting more people into it. And we also saw the merit badge festivities when that was launched a year and a half ago.
Now that's what I really wanted to mention, is because back in the 1970s I was growing up in chess, and we were trying desperately, the United States Chess Federation was trying desperately to get a merit badge for the Boy Scouts of America, and couldn't do it. And really, once again, a great shout out to Jeannie Sinquefield for having made that possible. That was just an enormous breakthrough. And of course,
our great popularization of chess. And to get back to the games, Grandmaster Maurice Ashley has something for us in the game between MVL and Aronian.
Well, there's a sacrifice alert on the board, a big moment in the game. Levon Aronian made a move that virtually forced the sacrifice to happen. Let's take a look. In this moment, he made what looked like a simple trade. Knight takes on d2, but it was daring white to capture back with the knight, because suddenly black would be able to play this beautiful move c5, liquidating in the center because of this pressure along the long diagonal. The bishop's opposed. Clearly, of course, this would be a blunder because he would just be hanging a piece. So this move, knight takes on d2, saying, well, what do you plan to do? Are you willing to sacrifice? And MVL said, sure, I'll take the knight back with the queen, because now after pawn takes pawn, clearly if he captures back, he's just simply losing a pawn. He looks prepared to play the move knight to g5, willingly going down a pawn with captures, but this position looks quite nice for white with the two bishops, even though down a pawn, the weak pawns in black's position. White should have compensation here, so the game, a tricky moment that is for both sides. Will Aronian now be surprised by the capture on d2? I mean, he must have suspected that the opponent could sacrifice, and he's staring at the board now. Maybe he didn't expect this trade back. Well, it looks like he has, and he's accepted the pawn, so he is now up a pawn, possibly for good. The game has certainly changed and heated up just like that after a simple exchange. Guys?
Nice, nice. Ben Feingold's prediction that while stayed at the moment, fireworks were going to come, we're seeing it now in this game on our boards. Knight takes d2, queen takes d2 by Max, and Levon has accepted the capture of the pawn. So let's just take a look at what the line that Maurice was saying. Knight g5, very attractive looking move. You attack the bishop. The bishop can't go to d5 in this particular case. That would be a huge error after e4. First of all, white isn't even losing a pawn anymore. He can recapture this pawn now. So the line that Maurice showed, there was one other sub-variation, and that was this move, bishop h6, pinning the knight to the queen. I was looking at a crazy line, Jen. I don't know what you thought about this, where you end up down here with this crazy move c3. I suspect it works out well for white, but it's definitely an attention grabber to be sure. This is you don't see this kind of situation
I'm
every
not really
day.
a big fan of attention.
Really? I didn't know that. But then the main line that Maurice was showing, and that's a kind of a, oops, I beg your pardon, I meant to capture on e6 first. I like white's I love pawns, but I like white's compensation very much here. This pawn on e6, natural target both for the queen and the bishop, and black's queen side still hasn't gone anywhere.
Bishops. That doesn't feel like a real pawn.
No, it feels really good for white, actually. This is just...
You're going to have trouble defending your e6 pawn twice. Right?
Yes.
And you're going to have to do with something like rook f6, but that would fall into a discovery with d5. So.
Right.
Yeah.
If the rook were to go over to the f6 square, as you mentioned, to defend the e6 pawn, that walks into that d4, d5 discovery. Kind of a little bit like Levon's two bishops yesterday against Vesel and Topolov were working very well. So let's see what Aronian has another choice, maybe a simpler and safer choice actually, which is kind of funny. Just go all the way back with the bishop, and once more after takes, and Maurice was mentioning how this bishop on g7 in ambushes is an ambush trying to pin on the long diagonal. You do have this move c4, c6, c5, I beg your pardon, attacking the pawn on d4 once again.
Well, e5 is also a possibility.
And also e5. Very good. Also,
Again, the pawn is pinned, and then we're also exerting pressure on the knight on g5, so bishop h6, even a weird-looking move like that could become a threat.
Exactly. That's in the offing as well. It's not very... White doesn't have a convenient way, so to speak, of answering this move
to
without
defend
knight
d4, because knight e3 is impossible, because then queen takes g5. That's a problem. Yeah.
Exactly. Let me just put e3 blocking the defense of the knight just simply allows it to be captured. So white would probably have to drop back with his knight, and then one has to wonder, are these split pawns very good?
Well, now at least your knight on f3 is guarding the queen on d2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's no longer a pin on the d file, and possibly rook b1 might justify the split pawns because you could put pressure against the b7 pawn.
Yeah, it still seems kind of fun, but I wonder after e5, knight f3, do we have to take on d4?
I beg your pardon.
Of course, c5 is also a possibility.
After e5, knight f3, not required.
If we play e4.
Ooh, e4. Okay, that's an ambitious move. Is the pawn a weakness or not? I'm not sure myself.
Yeah, big question. So, and also a question, you mean the pawn on d4 or the pawn on e4?
The pawn on e4, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Is that pawn on e4, it might not be so easy for you to defend it. If you defend it like bishop f5, then you're kind of encouraging this knight to come and tickle you here.
But you can also watch out for c5. Mm-hmm. Because I like that if I play c5 immediately, you could play d5.
At what moment? Here?
Oh, yeah, if black plays c5 here, white could play d5,
Oh,
right?
with pleasure,
but,
yes.
Once I play bishop f5 and you play knight c2, you're disconnected a little, so I could maybe play c5 at that moment.
Right, so bishop f5, what you were
saying.
Jumping
at the opportunity.
Knight c2, c5. Since my queen is not defended, what could be a good move? Maybe something like rook b1 now that the bishop is developed, trying something like this?
And reintroducing now the possibility of getting d5 in. So I'd probably want to take and play knight c6. And yeah, I see.
Some issues. It's a sharp way. I was thinking more in the Grunfeld pattern, which was to play c5 right away, just threatening to grab a pawn and playing for knight c6. Is this, or you think after d5 it's just simply a plus for white?
Well, d5 is a fun move to get to play, isn't it? I know you like that. Grandmaster Maurice Ashley has some thoughts for us on this line of play as well.
Well, just exploring the position, and it's some fantastic stuff that could happen, and the computers are going crazy finding good moves. First of all, in this line with bishop h6 that we discussed, bishop to h6 right here, white can play a real funky line after bishop takes, knight takes. Yeah, as you mentioned this point about c3, well, take a look. Ignore the attack on the bishop, and allow this position to happen. Can you imagine? Well, the bishop could go to c1 or c3. I just like this move just optically. The problem is this knight can just come back and go to c4 and then pick that pawn off. So that pawn has no future whatsoever. But going back to the game, after d takes on c4, white did play knight to g5. And now Aronian said, I like pawns. You can have your double pawns. But there's an issue here. After knight takes, pawn takes, it turns out that black does not have to capture back. Looks like the screen doesn't like my fingers, so I'll just go that way. Pawn takes. After black captures back, white doesn't have to take on b3. White has a very interesting move at this moment, the move queen to b4, sacrificing 2 pawns, going 2 pawns down temporarily, but threatening to shatter the structure right here on b7. And now black has to defend this pawn somehow. Queen b6 doesn't quite work because white is threatening in many directions, including the e7 pawn, also hitting the e6 pawn, and white is jumping all over black in this position. So queen b4, is this a move that maybe Levon overlooked after the move queen to c7, then queen takes on b3 instead, and now he's eyeballing the e6 pawn. His bishop can go to h3. Even if the queen were on d7, this kind of pincer attack is possible. So it may be that Levon overlooked this move, and he could be in a little bit of trouble in this position. We'll see what's going to happen in a moment.
Wow, the old Zwischenzug gets him every time. Queen
That's
d2
right.
to b4. That's a very powerful move. Nice one. I noticed that Maurice, one of his favorite puzzles is the retrograde analysis. I would ask Maurice, if I gave you the pawn on b2 as black, I would ask you, how the heck did you get your pawn to b2? And if you came up with the correct answer, you deserve your Grandmaster title, definitely. I'm not sure I'd be able to do it, is the point.
Well, once they give it to you, they don't take it away, right?
Yes, it's for life. It's for life.
Kind of like that.
We have a puzzle of the day. I saw a graphic there that was
I think
coming
that was
up.
a little preview.
Oh,
I think we're going to get to that in like 5 minutes.
Oh, it's a taster for us. Oh, that was
Not a
great.
mistake, just a preview.
And we do have again, intriguing moves are happening all across all the boards.
Show us Magnus Carlsen.
Well, I was mentioning, we'll just go back a moment. The move bishop g3 kind of looked strange to my eyes, and as Maurice has explained in his 3 million plus databases, games, this move bishop g3 is a novelty in this ancient line. Bishop c7, I like this cagey move by Fabiano. And then castles. Remember I was saying that black is waiting for white to give the address for his king, and suddenly, bang, knight h5.
We both want to put our knights in those f4, f5 squares,
F4,
right?
F5 squares, or even, and in this case, remember we were talking earlier about the g7, g5 and how that wouldn't work very well? Well, in this case, now that white has already declared where his king is going to reside, now the move g5 is actually justified, especially as it costs several tempi, and after bishop
And it's nice that you haven't castled yet, because otherwise knight takes g5 would be a feasible idea.
Exactly, and now after bishop g3, things could get very heated very early here with this king on g1. I like these flank attacks. In my days when I used to play the Philidor defense, I would look for these types of positions where the knight could come very strongly to this f4 square, and if the knight is captured, well, you're doing black a big favor by opening up the g file against your own king. So I don't think we're going to see this move bishop h4 by Magnus.
And as we should point out all the possible discovered attacks. A lot of times you don't want to put a piece on a square where it could potentially be attacked, right?
Right.
Because of a knight takes e5 type move.
Right. But here, how is this completely absurd?
So we should look at knight takes e5 because it looks kind of wild.
Exactly.
Because we are hitting f7. I mean, of course, knight takes g3 is that in-between move we like to talk about. If you recapture the bishop, then black recaptures on g3 recaptures the knight, and that's some material.
Right.
But instead, we got to look at the counter in between move
Bishop takes.
of something taking on f7, yeah.
So bishop takes f7 check. Now, Black cannot move his king to f8 because we have this nice little fork, so he has to walk his king to d8, but walking into a potential problem.
Can we take on c6 and then take on g3 with the f pawn?
Come again?
I want to take on c6 and then take on g3 with the f pawns, defending my bishop on f7.
I got you. So something like this, and the body count is 2, 3 pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
They don't give
5,
you your
6, 7.
title for counting.
Huh? No.
It's three pawns for a piece, right?
3 pawns for a piece, and Black's king is stuck on the
but
center.
on the other hand, our pieces aren't really primed for attack, are they? They're not
is
really
true.
crawling all over you.
Mm-hmm. And there's the potential for bishop a6 gaining a tempo against the rook. That could be a little bit awkward, Jen.
Can I do something better than knight takes c6 maybe? Let's back up a couple moves.
Okay.
So here, I play knight takes c6 here. What other possibilities do I have?
You have this one, knight
g6, yeah.
So that in case of captures, you've got to say the knight stuck in the corner. But like you say, opening up the rook, that has great merit. Queen takes, and again.
And now we've got a rook for 2 pieces. We've got a rook and 2 pawns for 2 pieces, right?
Right, but that king on d8 is looking pretty nice target. It's just
this one I like better, of course, because the material instead of a piece for 3 pawns, it's a rook and 2 pawns, right?
Yeah.
For 2 pieces. So.
Yeah, and this I'm beginning to think that this could actually work out in White's favor, simply because Black's king is still in the middle of the board, and White has a nice looking attack here, I must admit. So let's.
After knight to h5, I wonder.
Can we grab the pawn?
You spent on that move. Let's take a look on chess 24. You actually spent only 2 minutes.
On knight h5.
Yes.
So he wasn't too worried about this move, knight takes e5.
Missing here that
Let's see. Well, again, the obvious discovery against the knight. We're looking at knight takes g3.
Knight takes e5 and bishop g4, maybe.
You mean the queen being trapped?
Yeah, I think that's probably why. Because I'm like, how can you analyze all that in 2 minutes?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense.
But if you see the fact that White's queen is getting trapped on h5 square, then
because bishop takes f7 doesn't seem to change anything. You can just take with the queen. I mean, I was trying to distract your knight, or
right. I was.
Or even king f8.
I was just thinking that the queen remains trapped even after this
and then
loss of a
meanwhile,
pawn.
queen h4, you have the g5 in the position, right?
G5 is usually a very good move when you get a queen for it.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so process of elimination. I was like, there's no way Fabiano played knight h5 and calculated all those variations in 1 minute.
Or 2, no.
Yeah.
But he did see the queen trap. So so knight takes e5 is not on White's agenda of possibilities. So what else could White possibly do? How about this? This is a kind of a strange move. How about knight h4, returning the favor? And first of all, obviously we do open up this attack against the queen, the knight, I beg your pardon, with the queen. And we're angling for knight f5 ourselves. Interesting strategic fight over the f4 and f5 squares by both players. Would you imagine knight coming to f6 so that you could keep this square protected for a moment?
Yeah, that seems like an interesting idea. And now again, remember that castling leads to this knight g6 tactic that you mentioned earlier.
Right. So castling short is out of the question, but maybe Fabiano is happy to go. Well, actually, now he could castle short, but he could also castle long. And when the kings are on opposite sides of the board, as we know, it really leads to wild, open, attacking chess for both players.
We definitely expect this to get fun.
Yes.
We got some news from another game. Maurice Ashley with some thoughts on the Topalov game.
Yes, Jen, talk about fun. The game that Nakamura and Topalov are battling right now is something that has been seen before by Topalov himself. He played this game way back in 1997 against Alexei Shirov, but it was a rapid game, and look how the game went. It proceeded exactly as these players have now. We have this exact position on the board, and in this position, Shirov, that is, played the move c5, and after bishop to g5, h6, bishop to h4. Does this remind you of anything? g5 was played in that game. So we see this thematic in the Ruy Lopez with h6 and g5, and Topalov, not one to back down, sacrificed on g5, and the game went crazy. Actually, just to show a couple more moves, b3, bishop d3, c4, and e5, and that game just exploded, ended up in a draw. Well, what's happening now in this game? We could go to the game between Kulotz and Grandmaster Kulotz from Greece and Fabiano Caruana himself. He's played this position just 3 years ago with the black pieces, and after this move, knight b1, Nakamura's move today, rook e8, Caruana's move from back in 2011. So homework has been done by Nakamura, and it is now up to Topalov facing this move for the first time to show what he potentially has prepared. Guys?
Thanks, Maurice.
Goes to show how closely they follow one another's games. Hikaru playing an idea of
Indeed.
Fabiano Caruana.
And we have a turn over at one of my favorite places in the Central West End, Q Boutique, and that is the gift shop at the World Chess Hall of Fame. I hope she's buying something nice. Taryn, what do you got for us?
Hi, Jen. Yes, we are here at the Q Boutique in the World Chess Hall of Fame across the street. I am here with Brian Flowers. He is the store manager and buyer, and he's got a very special piece right here for us. Brian, do you want to tell us what this is?
Sure. This is a brand new chess set to Q Boutique. This is from Perling. They are a London-based luxury chess company. They've designed this beautiful board. It's called Dark Chess. It's a handmade illuminated board, and on top we have some lacquered pieces in burnt orange and white. Complements the set very well. Also has a dimmer on it, so you can set the mood however you like. Very nice piece of chess art here, definitely at Q Boutique, as well as our other selections. And definitely encourage everyone to come down and check out what we have.
Sure. Can we test it out? Can we dim it a little bit, see how it works?
Sure.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's very striking, and the way that the pieces are illuminated, it gives the illusion that they're actually levitating. So very impressive that this is handmade. Even the pieces are hand carved. And we are the first in the U.S. to carry this line from London.
Wow, awesome. Is there anything else here in the boutique or the Hall of Fame that people should know about?
Absolutely. In addition to the Sinquefield Cup, we also have 3 beautiful exhibitions that revolve around art and chess. And then we also have all kinds of chess memorabilia, World Chess Hall of Fame souvenirs, and we also have just general gift and decor. So we're a great place for holiday shopping, great place for gifts, whole 9 yards.
All right, well, thank you. As you guys can see, there's a lot of great pieces in here. They actually have won several awards and have been noticed as one of the best kept secrets in St. Louis. So you guys should come out and check them out.
Oh, thank you, Taryn and Brian. I've already checked them out every single time. Remember, I buy something for myself or for a friend. There was one holiday season where I think I bought all of my friends a piece of jewelry from the Q Boutique.
Very cool. I was in there the other day. I actually bought some postcards of the Chess King. And I'm going to get the players to all sign them and then send them out to friends. And it's a lovely shop. It really is.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely go over and check it out and have a caramel.
There you go.
And just another reason, actually, for you guys to come visit us live. We've got the commentary teams at the World Chess Hall of Fame and Lester's. So come on down, and if you are watching from home, we are going to be right back after a little break. While you're away, while we're away, rather, we've got a little puzzle for you to solve. So.
And who's on move?
Don't rest your brain.
No rest.